mental illness is rampant and going misdiagnosed and not diagnosed, and the self medication is happening. And the drugs are are tainted like a motherfucker. So if you are a user, if you are self medicating, please do your damnedest to indulge as safe as possible. And that's funny to say, but Professor Carl, what is Brez's last name with the dreads that was on the crack documentary?
On the Breakfast Club.
Did you see his Breakfast Club interview?
I saw parts of it. I didn't see the whole thing.
Was that not the most frustrating 56 minutes of your life?
Yeah, I didn't see the whole thing, but I saw the clips of it, and yeah, it sounded like they was in to talk about some wild shit.
Gee, he simply saying he at no point did he endorse drug usage. He was saying the propaganda that was leveraged to put black folks in prison is a real thing. And if you are going to use, do it as safe as possible with the purest form of those drugs that you can.
Yeah, I saw he was talking about like the issue being like it bypassing the source and going directly to like what the product actually is and fighting against like the individuals that was using or selling it. Kind of saw that.
What he was saying.
But it was using, right? Like who was using it?
But he's a researcher, so that's how he started. He was like he started using at 30 because he was like, I can't research these drugs and have these takes if I don't know the actual effects of them. Mm-hmm. So he began using, and he was the example that he was using was heroin and morphine. Mm-hmm. It's like it's the same thing with two additional biological with two additional properties that don't have any biological effect. So technically, they're exactly the same thing. One is just has a medical term and isn't accepted, and the other has been demonized for the benefits of capitalism. There's no way to dispute that. Mm-hmm. And he's also saying, he's like, yo. He's like, and if you get the purest form of it, you're least likely to OD or die in these tragic ass ways. And so,
but isn't the problem though that it stopped being pure? Like the further away from its source, the less pure it became. So by the time if it got into a hood or whatever. In order to cut the cost of like how you were making it
for the benefit of capitalism, that's
right.
That's the only point he was making.
So it was more of like a insertion of human error than it is to like
than the actual plant itself,
right.
Because it's heroin, coke, like they all derive from a fucking plant.
Yeah.
And so that's what is like the human error element of it, and the capitalism portion. And that's the conversation he was attempting to have. And it's always frustrating when Charlemagne and Envy try to act like they're not even agenda. They just think they're smarter than they are, and they're unwilling. And like they're so, but they are doing radio and it's entertainment. So it might just be more of that. So let me be gracious in that. But
at the same time,
that's the agenda though.
He sat on Joe Rogan and had the same conversation, and it was completely different. But it's a 3-hour conversation, so it's taken out of context, and everybody took the headline and went, "Yale professor is a heroin addict," and he's like, "Wait, bro, that's not what I said."
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen that Joe Rogan episode, I'd encourage everybody to go watch it and watch the fucking crack documentary, for crying out loud, because he explains it in vivid detail how the propaganda of crack alone waged a war on black folks. And is the reason so many black folks are incarcerated today. So it's the only conversation he was trying to have, and it's completely been fucking hijacked by people's agendas, and it's really really disheartening. My bad, Lex. Go ahead.
I can't remember what I was gonna say,
shit.
But you probably wrapped it up in there, and that's why it's gone.
Yeah, and people don't understand like how propaganda and like your agenda coincide because they've basically programmed you to think a certain way.
Yeah.
So they programmed you to think a certain way towards something that you're not knowledgeable of. So I do commend him as a researcher actually doing the drug in order to know what the effects are before you are talking about it, because that's a lot of the chaos around drugs or whatever, like something to know about drugs in particular is that it's biological. So like you have your entire body is made up of biology. Yeah. So drugs aren't going to do to you what it might do to another person, depending on like what your setup is on your interior. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more that goes into drugs than just it's bad for you. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like it's sometimes it's euphoric for some people. Yeah. It opens up your mind for other people to be creative. It does all kind of things. Like it gives you free reign to have access to more without having to worry about shit that is like. You know,
and it's all
like it's a lot that goes into it.
It's all really convenient branding too. He talked about it. He's like, yo, it just depends on what's in and who wants to push the initiative. It's like the wave that mushrooms and psychedelics are having right now is, he's like, it's unprecedented. Like that shit was demonized too in the 70s, and now it's like, nah. Ayahuasca and like how freely everybody talks about all these things, it's like, bruh, it is solely agenda based, and it's hard to disprove and discount that it's attached to race and capitalism.
That's because they found out about Silicon Valley.
You feel me?
I think
what they be getting into.
The other thing I remembered was also him trying to teach people. Because it's like when he was like, it's realistic. Some people are just going to do certain drugs. Mm-hmm. So I'm here to tell you,
that's what
don't mix this with this. Because when you mix these two, the chemicals alone have a certain reaction. Yeah. And that's why you
That's the point. That's exactly that. I'm so glad you said that. Because that's the analogy. He was like, so you guys got kids. The conversations in and around sex is going to come. And it's like, you can say don't have sex, but what are kids going to do? They're going to go have sex. So instead of going don't have sex, why not educate them on how to do it as safe as possible? He's like, okay. He's like, so nobody wants to hear it, but it's the same with drug consumption. You can say don't do it, but there's all these different exposures and things that are fully beyond your control. And it's like, yo, you just got to be. It's like Mac Miller might still be here had he known the damages of fucking fentanyl and how rampant it was on the market. Like that was a like an epidemic essentially. It's like people were getting all kind of bad batches of coke, Molly, and everything that were being cut with fentanyl. And because no one was talking about it or educating it, we had an insane record. Like the overdose annual rate is already through the roof. But that wave of fentanyl, like right around when Mac died, the amount of people that were dying from overdoses directly with fentanyl in their system was crazy. I think he said that it was in ASAP Yam's. It wasn't fentanyl that was in ASAP Yam's toxicology report. It was the chemicals that was mixed that caused his heart failure. And so that's the research he was trying to help. It's like, yo, with this drug culture, we won't necessarily be able to stop it, but we can educate and inform so people know not to fucking take opioids and drink alcohol. Your heart stops. The likelihood of your heart stopping when you mix opioids and alcohol is like something insane. And so it's like he promised ASAP Yam's mother to educate people on that, as opposed to wagging his finger going, don't do that. I don't know. It made sense to me. I hope more people were learning, and it's definitely not to sit here and induce it, but it is to endorse. It is to endorse normalizing conversations that may not agree with your
core beliefs.
But it's core beliefs, but it also is a convenient core belief. Like people's core beliefs shift on convenience and like.
Well, if you're never gonna do a drug, then obviously you're gonna have like this devilish view towards it. You know what I mean? Like if you've interacted with it, then it'll be less likely that that's the case, I would think.
Gee, I'm not doing no heroin. No,
nobody said go do heroin.
Yeah, no, knock on anyone who's a user. I'm not doing it, but I appreciated I appreciated the dialogue and the expertise of someone who does. Also, to your point, I'm biased because one of the capstone is what you have to submit for graduation in college. But part of the stepping stone to my thesis was Portugal was the first country to completely abolish drug offense crimes. Like completely, they just did away with you could not be cited for a drug offense, and by proxy they began opening these like kiosks essentially to get clean brand new needles for users, right? And these safe methods of using, and they saw crime drop significantly, and they saw fucking overdoses cut in half. And it's like, dog, like, come on, man, like, so you locking people up who are addicts? What sense did that make unless you can benefit from it? I don't know.
Another thing is, even for people who don't do heroin, it's also for people who sip a lot of lean.
Yep. Yes.
Some people don't even connect the two, and it's like he says a lot, and I know some people just instantly only connect all the jewels that he's given to people who do like heroin and shit like that, and then they ignore the fact that like there'll be some people who will be like, oh, this motherfucker done heroin before while they're sipping lean, like judging him when it's almost the same shit. It's still opioid. So
that's what I'm saying when I say drugs, though. Like, drugs doesn't have to be like necessarily like the hardest core drug that you could possibly do.
Yeah.
But it's all, I would say, underneath like the umbrella of like, you just have to understand like some of the things that folks tend to go through, some of the things that people tend to be exposed to is different across the board. But if you haven't experienced it, then of course you're going to have a certain type of view towards it.
Yeah.
But it's important to, like anything, be educated on like the full scope of it.
Yeah.
Before the opinion.
Yeah.
Like what folks do is they jump to the opinion.
Facts.
And disregard being educated whatsoever on what they're talking about. It just sounds good. But then it unfortunately has a bunch of people that will jump on board with that because they're a part of like that group social atmosphere.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's whoever has the more voices in a crew is the ones that are going to be the ones that are heard for the most part. So I would say that the drug community is a lot smaller than it is for like the other community. I would say as far as like the voices go, so that will be overshadowed.